Amy Goodman may not be invited on Meet the Press, but believe it or not, in the 1940s, a regular panelist on Meet the Press was I.F. Stone. And I.F. Stone would not likely be invited today, but if he were alive today, like the I.F. Stones that are operating today, we know that he would have a regular forum for his reporting and analysis on a program called Democracy Now! Many of you were at Ithaca College when we had Amy Goodman's colleague from Democracy Now!, the correspondent, Jeremy Scahill. And Jeremy met with our students all day long, and he kept telling the story of the very first day he volunteered for Amy and Democracy Now! It was near the beginning, and Amy put him in this tiny, cramped closet full of newspapers and books and said, here's a stack of newspapers, clip everything about Iraq. And then a little while later, Amy disappears and comes back, and Jeremy says, Amy, where's your office? And Amy says, you are in my office. Now, from that day to this day, through her talent and her tenacity, Amy has built up a daily broadcast of global reach and importance, giving voice not just to the policymakers, but their critics and often their victims. And when you look at Democracy Now! Today and you see 24 employees, 24 staff members, you see 700 TV and radio stations, truly one of the indispensable independent media outlets in our country's history. You know of her bravery, you know of her work ethic, you've seen she's arrested, she's beaten, she's reported from dangerous locations across the globe, and if you doubt that she's independent of political parties and politicians, go ask President Bill Clinton or go ask President Barack Obama. I give you 2008 Izzy Award winner Amy Goodman.
Wow, what an honor it is here to be here with, well, my fellow honoree, Glenn Greenwald, to be here honored by the Park Center for Independent Media, to be here with Izzy Stone, I.F. Stone's family. Thank you so much to Adelaide Gomer for all that she has done for independent media. It is... I wanted to give a little context to the video that you saw that actually includes Jeff Cohen, who I'd also like to thank tonight. That part of the video that showed Chris Matthews, it was the 10th anniversary of MSNBC. Usually he's in a studio in Washington and has his guests on by satellite around the country. But that day was special, and so he had come to New York to do the broadcast for several hours from Rockefeller Center. Upstairs at the top of the rock, as they call it, the executives were celebrating 10 years of MSNBC. And for that special, that afternoon, he'd invited 4 people on. Brian Williams, the news anchor of NBC, the Israeli ambassador, and to my surprise, me, and to be debating the right-wing radio commentator Smirkonich of Philadelphia. And we did it outside in front of a crowd. And before I went on the air, I was home watching the beginning, and I saw there was this big crowd, and they were waving the American flag, and they were talking about the bystanders who were there to watch. And I thought, you know, I'm a New Yorker, I don't usually see people just waving the American flag, but I understood when I got to the program, because at the breaks, they said, if you want to be called on, you know, wave the flag. And of course, lots of people had things to say. It was an important time. And it was during the war in Iraq. And just as they were coming out of a commercial, one of the producers said to Chris Matthews, said, why don't you do a shout out to the executives at the top of the Rock and say you'll be partying with them later, because it was the big celebration of MSNBC. And so it was at that moment that I thought to also send a message to the executives at the top of the Rock. So we came out of the commercial and everyone was waving the American flag, the bystanding New Yorkers. And as Chris welcomed the executives, I said, and asked me a question, I said, before I answer that question, I too wanted to just say to the executives, congratulations for 10 years of MSNBC. And congratulations to you, Chris, but it would be particularly wonderful if Phil Donahue were here as well, celebrating with you. Because you know Phil's story. You know, Phil, who did the Donahue Show for, oh, how many years, was really at the top of his game, the precursor to Oprah, really brought up a lot of important issues over those decades with an audience of millions, particularly of women around the country. And then he came back to MSNBC right before the war, right before the invasion of Iraq. And he was doing a show with Jeff Cohen is his producer, where it was one of the only shows that you could watch on the cable networks that was bringing out voices of the anti-war movement. Sure, they had plenty of people who were pro-war, but they also brought out a different perspective that you might say represented the majority of people in the United States.